So welcome to Beauty of Colors podcast, Roland. It's great to have you on the show.
Oh, thanks so much. This is fantastic. I'm looking forward to some good conversation.
Excellent. So tell the listeners about you and what drove you in becoming an author.
So sure, my name is Rolland Sarver, and I actually published a book a year ago this month, back in September 22. The title of it is The Value Message: Celebrate Your Value, Uncover Your Gift and Potential. And what really inspired me was children, because I'm pretty much your average Joe. Don't think of myself as a writer, but it just came to me like there was a lady at work, young lady, and her family. She was going to have a little girl, and they were all excited, like everybody is when a child is born. And I just was mulling that over in my head, and I thought, well, when does a person's value change? Like, is it so? This little girl, it's just so clear when a child is born, but is it like when they're a teenager going through a rough spot, or maybe when that young girl is going to be a mother someday, or just facing some challenges in life when she's older, when she's in the nursing home? And it just dawned on me that, like, there's people have a value that never changes. And so I just thought more and more about that. And I kind of think of myself as a value coach, because it's always been in me to help people see their value. But it was just that really that started the book project. And I had some time, and I just spent time just writing things down, and it just started to come out, and just stories and connections and people, and just a real look at your value. So the book is a look at your real true value, compared to how society and culture sees it, and sometimes our own minds undermine it. So it's just like a real effort to look at that. And so the book it's not like 100% perfect, but that doesn't matter to me. And it's my effort to give people a message about their value. And what I'm not going to do is sit on the bench anymore and do nothing. So it's just brought about a lot of super interesting conversations and connections with people, which I'm just really, really thankful for.
So what's the name of the book again, Roland? Could you say
The
that again?
Here, I got a copy right here. So the name of it is The Value Message.
The value message. Okay.
Celebrate your value, uncover your gift and potential. And it's really just that. It's just a message about your value, because so much of the time, because of maybe trauma or abuse or experiences, messages that come to us about our value can be on the negative bandwidth. So it's just a message, a deep look, a message about your real value, and to bring that into people's awareness. So I use a couple tools that just kind of initiate some really good conversations. For one, is to help people just become aware of how they think about their value, or how other people think about their value. And one of the quotes that I just love and I use a lot is that when other people see your value, you are advantaged. But when you see your value, you're unshakable. And I feel like, so, some of us grew up with the advantage of maybe parents or peers having a positive conversation about our value, but that's not always the case. And what happens when we maybe grow up and step away from that? We've been advantaged, but what makes us unshakable is when we see our own value. Now, when I talk to people, my goal isn't so much that Raleigh tells you about your value, which I can do that, but that at the end of the day, when people walk away, not Raleigh telling you about your value, but you telling you about your value, because that's the real game.
So Roland, I know that you kind of talk a little bit about value, but what exactly are you talking about when you say value? Because it can mean different things to different people. So what exactly is it?
Yes, so it's I use another tool to try to clarify, I believe, what you're asking. So I think there's a part of us, like soul value, in a sense, that is, our value is different, separated from our skill sets and abilities. One tool I use that's been kind of great for conversation is I give people a visualization of two boxes. In fact, let me pull this little paper up here. I call it, I'm just an amateur, but it's I call it the two box illustration. So I say, hey, picture a table, and there's two boxes on this table. One it's a box about the size of a shoebox, brown, no wrappers, no labels, no nothing. It's just plain. Everybody has a box exactly like that and never changes. But the other box, I use that to symbolize, like I call it the ego box, and it represents everything about our person, our eye color, our choices, our skill sets, where we're from, all those things. That box always changes. It's full of labels. No two ego boxes have ever been the same. So like I use that to help separate our skill sets, for example, from a real true value. And I throw this out there. I say, hey, well, so say I'm a runner and I'm running, I fall and break my leg. Oh, I can't compete. I can't contribute to the team. I'm worthless. Well, hold on. Now, wait a minute. Let's think about that. Your ego box has broken a leg. Yes, it's going to be painful. No, you can't compete. But your value box hasn't changed or blinked. It's completely the same. And I think we can throw other scenarios in there too, like maybe I'm having some financial trouble or relationship trouble. I'm going through a divorce or I've been abused. Well, then, I say, okay, so your ego box is having some financial trouble. Maybe you've been abused and you suffer trauma, but your value box hasn't even blinked. It's exactly the same. It's never changed. And I think that just starts conversation around, hey, how can we separate that? Because without separating that, there's going to be anxiety and stress and problems when we, for example, when we feel like our skill sets and abilities are tied to our real innate value.
Okay. So what you're saying is that your skill set and your values are two different things.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, got you.
And
So,
now let me throw one more thing in there. So to kind of clarify that, I use another term called ego box value. And so, for example, if I have a fleet of trucks, my truck drivers, because they have a license, they have a skill set value to me. I call it an ego box of value because I can work with that and use that. But that's still separate from this like deep innate soul value that I talk about.
So in your book, do you talk about mental health awareness, or is that a different topic and it's not in your book?
Yes, I do. That is, I'm like yourself, a advocate for mental health. I feel like it's so, oh my goodness, it's so important and it's so deep, but yet there's a simplicity to it. And to me, so there's a story in there in my book that I talk about. It's actually a true story. And I got this from William Glasser, who is a psychiatrist, wrote a lot of books along the line of, well, basically, we're all control freaks or recovering control freaks. And he gives us tools how to develop better relationships and tools to let go that hinder better relationships. And to me, that's a huge foundation for mental illness. But he tells about a story. There's a young lady named Molly who's in a psychiatric ward, and they're going to commit her for life to the psychiatric ward because she quit talking to people and she claimed God spoke to her, just a few things like that. And it's just no cause for the ramifications of being committed to the psych ward for her entire life. So luckily, there's a young psychiatric intern who came to her case and just tried some new things, which was as simple as listening, talking to her, and finding out what her story was. And it's beautiful to me, and it's so powerful because in a couple weeks, she was interacting with people, she was changing her clothes, she was doing a lot of things, and in a couple more weeks, she was actually released from the psychiatric care. But the thing that made the huge difference was it was somebody that just listened and had a message, from my vantage point, had a message about her real true value that she never heard before in her life. And the difference is just profound. One of my favorite stories. I totally love it. And for me, that's care and healing in a nutshell. And anyway, I've referred to that story a lot. because it's legitimate, it's documented, and it's absolutely real. It's true. Not everybody. How would you say that? Psychiatric care is huge. Mental health is huge, but there's a lot of simple things that I was not aware of that is so helpful, has helped me in my journey and walk, but also super helpful to other people. So I do cover a lot of in the mental health arena, and just try to bring into people's awareness the importance of relationships and healing, and the power that comes into play when we help people see their true real value.
Wow. So the story with Molly, the one you just said, what changed? Did she, when she got into that institution, is it because people were just nurturing her and caring for her, or did she kind of find her value in there?
I think it's both. Uh, so the backstory, how it is, like we see people in a situation have no idea what their backstory was, but this is what comes out that this intern listened to. She's growing up, she's trying to make her parents happy, but she could never do that. So for example, she got like first chair with her clarinet in the high school orchestra. So she's going to go home, she's excited, her folks are going to be happy. Her dad takes her clarinet, breaks it up on the table, says, "You'll never amount to nothing." And so that wasn't an isolated incident, obviously. So you're growing up in that environment, never hearing a message about your value, no idea about it. And she had difficulty with other relationships as a result of that kind of nourishment and nurturing. So like, oh, wow, that makes sense. So she comes to the ward, which, and this is 50 years ago, probably.
Mm-hmm.
So honestly, there wasn't a lot of help in the ward except for this intern just trying some new things, new idea. And he has an interesting story in his journey. He was actually involuntarily committed to the psychiatric ward at one time because he's trying new things with people, listening, understanding, empathy. So I think it's it was, to me, it's that message. This intern's listening. Molly, you have value. You've never heard that message before, but you have value. And as a result of that, I feel like that's the game changer. Things started to change in her awareness of her own mind, of her own value, and just thinking about those things. And
Wow.
I have a now this is kind of a, I throw this in there about God's point of view just to be funny, because she said God spoke to her and she quit talking to everybody else. So I just tell it this way. I say, so God looked down and said, long before the doctors or the whole situation, he says, "Oh, there's going to be a problem here, but maybe her parents will help her out, or her peers, or her boyfriend." And he's like, "That ain't working." So this doctor, this intern, his name is Al Siebert, he
Mm-hmm.
comes on the scene, and God says, "You know what? I'm going to go down there myself, and I've got a message for Molly." So he says, "Molly," what she says, "He made me feel like the most important person in the world." And so he says, "Molly, you're real important to me." And this is just my description. You can take it for what it's worth, but she says, "I never heard nothing like that before." And in fact, I'm going to quit talking to people because I don't want to lose sight of that. So anyway, so I feel like, well, okay, maybe that brought the change back, and then God says, "Oh, that Al Siebert, I think something's gonna happen. He's gonna talk to her, and I can just step out of the picture and everything. They're gonna be fine." So anyway, that's just my take on it. And I throw that in there just for a little bit of humor, but just to try to describe the simple power of listening and getting to the root of people's stories and helping them. Again, not Raleigh telling you about your value, but people seeing their own value for themselves.
Wow.
And
So what is the audience? Like, what audience do you serve? Like, what audience are you gearing towards? What age group? Is it everybody, or do you have a
it,
particular?
That's interesting. That's kind of evolved for me because I didn't really have an audience in mind except for just every age group or anybody that struggles with seeing their value. But it's evolved in this sense that I find that an audience is coming toward this message that have trauma or abuse or just question their value. And I think a lot of people struggle with that on various different levels. And I illustrate it this way. I say, like, if we're in a boat and we crack the throttle and try to get forward motion, but we got a huge anchor hanging out the back, that's the struggle with our value. If we can cut that off, we can get in forward motion no matter what the next step is, no matter what we do next. And in fact, we got some other boat anchors hanging out the back that are like maybe the financial troubles, relationship problems, self-doubt, just struggles or whatever. Well, now we got more energy to focus on those because we got this big, huge one cut off. And so I find that my audience has kind of evolved where at first I had a message for a general audience, but it seems like people that maybe struggle with mental health or have trauma and abuse they're trying to overcome, because that message is so negative. The abuse and trauma message is so negative that I've got a different message for you. In fact, I've got another tool. If you don't mind, I'll just
Yeah, go
share
ahead.
this with you that I've used, and that's generated some just really neat conversations. I try to make it sound technical, but it's really not. I call it the value orientation tool. And it's just like a doctor's pain scale, 0 being the least, 10 being the most.
Mhm.
And it's just to bring awareness to how we perceive our own value, how other people perceive our own value, and how we perceive other people's value. And so, for example, maybe, hey, if we're having a good day and we're kind of balanced, we might think of a number for ourselves, like 7 or 8 would be how I perceive my own value. If I spill my wife's coffee on her computer, it might be a 3 or 4, depending on how expensive the computer was. Or somebody that's arrogant, we might think, well, they see themselves as a 9 or 10, when maybe they see themselves as a 6, and they want you to see them as a 10. And this is, I totally love this part, because I say to people when I present this, if you feel like your value is a 1 or 2, maybe you struggle with suicide or self-harm or things like that, or you know somebody like that that's a 1 or 2, you can't leave this presentation until I'm done. If I got to wrestle you to get your car keys, you're not leaving, because I've got some really good news for you. And you're going to like what I'm about to tell you, but we're a 10. I'm a 10, you're a 10, she's a 10, he's a 10. There's never been a time when you didn't have value. You will always have value. And there's never been a time that you did not have value. And for me, that again, I don't want you to see yourself as a 10 because I told you, but I want you to see yourself as a 10 because you understand that.
Yeah, that is so true. It's the story that you tell yourself. Like you have to tell yourself that, you know.
Yes.
So,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
yeah. So that makes a difference, you know. You can't let people's perception of you become your reality. So you have to see yourself as being, that 10, and not being a 1. If somebody else sees you as 10 and you don't see yourself as 10, then, it's, as you said, you wouldn't let the person leave the conference or whatever you're
Yes.
yeah.
And another thing that it's just kind of fun to throw that out there, because I'll pick somebody out and say, oh my goodness, here's a 7 right in the middle of us. I'm so sorry. But I say that as a joke because it's easy for us to see ourselves as that 7. If there was no hope and an exception, I knew it would be me, because I can see everybody else as a 10, because maybe we don't see their dark secrets or side like we do in clarity with ourselves. So I just say that because I think it's easy for us to beat ourselves up right off the bat, And I love to point. I say, okay, no, seriously, no 7, you're a 10. And again, not because I said, but let's get to where it's because you said. And back to that quote, when we see our value, we're unshakable.
Yeah, that's true. That is so
Like like Lisa Nichols, she says, oh my goodness, she's been a big help to me. But she
yeah.
says other people's opinion is none of your business. You
Yeah.
just, just whatever they think about you.
That's true. You can live on other people's opinion of you, or else your life is, yeah, that is true.
Yes.
Um, so where can the listeners get a copy of your book?
From my website, I publish with Amazon. It's on Amazon, but my website is thevaluemessage.com, and every link is available there. Everything points to Amazon at my website. Now, my website is I want it to be a resource for people.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of other information on there, but my book is accessible on Amazon.
So how many pages are your book, and how long will it take for the reader to, is it a
Mhm.
self-help book or not?
It is. I say it's a self-help book, and
Mhm.
it looks like it's right at 174 pages. It's probably a 3-hour read, I'd say. Mhm.
Okay, sounds good. So do you have any last words for the listeners about improving their life and their value?
Uh, just the message that you can do it. There's just no question about it. You have a lot of potential, people. You are the gift. And back to that quote, I feel like I'd like to leave that with people, that just like the last part of that quote, when you can see your own value, you're unshakable.
Amen. Okay. Well, thank you, Roland, for being on Beauty of Colors podcast.
Yes, so you're so welcome. Thanks so much.